So we got 30 minutes to go through this. One announcement before we start. So you might recall that I messed up the syllabus. That is, I forgot to add last week as a reading week, and therefore all of the further dates in the syllabus no longer make sense. So the procedure in such a case is for you as a class to vote on whether to accept a revised syllabus. I've put a revised syllabus on the blackboard for you to review, and we'll vote next week. So here, this time, next week, and if more than 50% of you agree, I hope you will, then we'll go to the revised syllabus. So nothing changes on the marking scheme. Some of the dates have shifted. For example, the quiz 2, which was supposed to be due today, didn't make sense to have due today because we didn't do a week worth of material. So it'll be due, I believe I suggested it should be due a week from today. So take a look at that. If any of you have really serious problems because of any of the changes, please let me know and we'll figure something out, okay? Does that sound fair? So that's a good opener for talking about this test because it's me demonstrating clearly that I also can make small but important mistakes and that nonetheless, hopefully, well, I still think I'm a smart person. Hopefully you still think I'm a smart person, despite the fact that I made this small but rather important mistake. A couple of small but important mistakes that people made on the test include, for example, not writing their name on the test, or not writing their name where they're supposed to write their name, or not filling in their student number on the associated Scantron sheet. So at least 3 people wrote out their student number but didn't fill in the bubbles below the student number where the Scantron would actually scan it. So small but important mistakes. It's good that we're doing this now because now you won't make the same mistake when the stakes are higher later on, right? Okay, so also I will emphasize more on the next test the idea of not having your cell phones on such that it will be silent for everybody. That's a lesson, like I got all worked up about it, but like it doesn't really matter in this context, but when you go out into the world, like it's gonna be like at a funeral or something, or like a wedding, and your dumb ringtone's gonna go off, and then you'll feel really bad. So now is a really good time to practice that stuff. They will also get you in much more trouble if that happens at the exam. So, and that'll be, because they run the exam, that'll be out of my hands. I can't be nice and forgiving in that context. They decide what happens. So, one more chance to practice this on the second test, and then on the exam, and then in all of the weddings and funerals and really serious events in the rest of your life, you'll be able to not be that person who has their cell phone go off. So, things to practice, right? Any questions about that? Please do take a look at the revised syllabus. My proposed revised syllabus is on the blackboard. It's all basically the same content, but with slightly different dates. And the test is the test has been moved back. Everything's been moved back a little bit. The test has been moved back, and it's also been moved to the Thursday so that we can write in that much nicer room. This is not a good room to write tests in. Yeah? Okay, great. Let's get to the interesting stuff. So I'm going to go through these one by one, tell you what I thought the answer was, and if you think there is either a better answer or an answer that should also have been acceptable, give me an argument for why, and we can talk about this, okay? So, an inference is it always marked by an inference indicator? No. I explicitly told you that no, it's not always marked by an inference indicator, right? Sometimes it's implicit. You don't actually have to explicitly mark that something is supposed to be an inference, right? Okay? An inference is a guarantee that the conclusion is true if the premises are true. That can't be right either because there are inductive inferences, right? Things that merely make the conclusion more likely, not guarantee it to be true. Yeah? Okay. Generating new knowledge by observation, that can't be generally right either because you can have deductive inferences where no new knowledge is being generated and certainly not by observation. That leaves us the only option. An inference is necessary for something to be an argument. I think that's right. Yeah? Any worries about that? Okay. So, what is the following argument pattern called? If you walk for 2 hours, then your feet will be sore. You didn't walk for 2 hours, so your feet are not sore. I had to make the Scantron key at least twice because I screwed up this one when I was marking it, but I think I got it now. I believe this is denying the antecedent. So there's the antecedent and the consequent. The antecedent is the first part of the conditional, consequent is the second part, and what you've done here is deny the first part. So it's not this, therefore not that. And this is, of course, a logical fallacy, right? Okay? Let me know if you think any of these were profoundly unfair or even modestly unfair, or if I didn't teach something hard enough for you to be able to get the question. That would also be really helpful feedback. The average on this was frankly low. The average on the short answer was about 70. The average on the multiple choice was 54, which I was surprised by. That's the lowest average I've ever had on an assignment that I designed. So I'm looking for opportunities to help you out here. Let me know if there's anything that I can adjust. You have to actually give me a reason, though. I can't just say, oh, everybody's great, you get 10 extra points. I need an actual reason why at least one of these was either unfairly phrased or another answer should be acceptable or that kind of thing. Okay? All right. So if a statement is categorical, a lot of you said it attributes a property to an object. But that's not quite right, is it? Because my dog is fuzzy attributes a property to an object, but is not a categorical claim. A categorical claim is supposed to attribute a property to a class, like all dogs are fuzzy. Yeah? A statement typically isn't by itself a fallacy. A fallacy usually something that is a problem between going between statements. Nonetheless, there's no reason to think that categoricals typically contain fallacies. And a categorical does not need to be checked by observation. For example, all triangles have 3 sides. Well, that's a categorical. It attributes a property to a class of objects. But nonetheless, you don't have to go out into the world and check out all the triangles to see whether that's true or not. Okay. Affirming the consequent, so just checking whether you know what this thing is naming, is a logical fallacy. That's a classic logical fallacy. And if I let you out of this class without knowing what affirming the consequent is, my philosophical peers will disdain me. They will think that I've utterly failed you, because this is like the classic argument fallacy. Affirming the consequent definitely does not preserve truth. It does the opposite of that. It is logically valid but generally unsound. Well, it's an argument form, so you can't really tell whether it's generally sound or not. It depends what you plug into it, but it's certainly not generally valid either. And D was just to check whether you know what antecedent and consequent mean. So affirms that a consequent follows from some antecedent. That would be just to make a categorical claim, right? Or not a conditional claim. Any conditional claim says, if you have this antecedent, you get that consequent. But that's not what you're doing in affirming the consequent. All right. Okay. Belief bias is the tendency to believe things without reason. Not exactly, not really. Is an unreasonable preference for inductive arguments. I don't think that has anything to do with what I said about the belief bias. Is the tendency to judge arguments valid when you believe the premises and conclusion. That's what I think belief bias is and does, yeah? And D is a different kind of bias. D is confirmation bias, the tendency to pay attention to information that confirms your belief. It's a different kind of bias. It's also a bias. It's also something we're riddled with, but it's not belief bias. Okay? Okay. Meta-ethics. Claims that ethical theories can be justified. Well, anti-realists have a meta-ethical position, but they say the opposite of that. They say ethical theories cannot be justified. A lot of people said B is a field which describes what is good and bad. So like, that's the one that I'm closest to thinking might also be a right answer. It's not, strictly speaking, correct. Because metaethics, the point of this question was to diagnose if you know the difference between ethics and metaethics. Metaethics is the field that talks about whether ethical theories themselves can be justified. It's not the same as saying that something is right or something is wrong. That's what ethical theories do. So ethics is the field that studies what's right and wrong. Metaethics is the field that studies whether you can justify what is right and wrong. Similarly, C doesn't have a general sort of like hold on what ethics says. I mean, some people say that in metaethics, but D was what I was looking for. I think D is like pretty much the only thing I told you about metaethics, other than that it's what it's for. Does anybody want to make a case for one of these other answers? Yeah.
Like, to say that it claims that ethical theories can be justified, even though that there's some that say that they can't, isn't it still, like, there's still a majority of people saying that it can't be justified? So generally?
Yeah. Yeah, okay. So as a generic claim, metaethics claims that ethical theories can be justified. Okay. Okay, yeah, I will accept that as an answer. Okay, so I'm going to go, this means that I get to go back through all of your multiple choice sheets and figure out which one was 6 on your form. And if you answered A, I'll give you the mark for it. Six. Any further arguments here? That wasn't so hard, right? Yeah. Yeah, so D and A. We're at no point are we going to reduce the number of acceptable answers. We can only expand it through this process. Okay? So you're not going to screw over one of your classmates by making a case for one of these. Yeah?
I think C, because it doesn't say that all of ethics can be justified by pure reason, but it could say that some of ethics can be proven by pure reason.
Okay. Okay. Let me think for a sec. So
I don't even know which one I answered.
that's good. That's you're doing this purely out of what you think is correct. Are you further comments on that? Yeah.
Yeah, but like the C, I mean, says that ethics can be justified by pure reason. I mean, it's not an inherent property of metaethics.
It's not, but I already accepted the argument that said if they generally, so we're accepting a generic reading rather than reading these as definitions. So what I'm having trouble is coming up with a reason why I should reject this argument, but not that argument.
Then you can't reject B either because what meta means, if we say meta-analysis, we mean an aggregate of all analysis. And if you're saying that it's meta-ethics, that means you're just combining all the ethical theories and saying if they can be good or bad. I mean, if they can say anything good or bad, so they are determining if anything is good or bad.
I'm dubious about that because metaethics is not just the collection of all ethical theories sort of wrapped up in a bundle, right? Like it's a meta level study of ethical theories. So like, like zoologists study animals, but that doesn't make zoologists a collection of animals. They're like, that's their object of study rather than the thing that constitutes the field itself. But B was the only one that I thought was a plausible answer before you guys started arguing with this. So, Well, the easiest thing for me to do would be to give everybody. So far we've said that 3 of these are acceptable answers, and the 4th one was the one I officially announced. Yeah, maybe that's okay. Yeah.
I think B could be right here.
Please give me a good argument.
You know, I don't know if it's like better source, but Wikipedia blockchain.
It's not a bad source. That's not a bad source.
Okay, one of the example questions they have for meta-ethics
Yeah.
are some things morally right or wrong for all people at all times. Is that valid?
Yeah. Okay, so like let me just defend myself so that I don't feel like this was a totally stupid question a little bit, but it's a good argument. What they say in that question is, do there exist things that are right or wrong for everybody at all times, but not which things specifically are right or wrong, although that's right. Okay, you've now convinced me that all 4 answers for question 6 were acceptable. Okay. Well, okay, so that makes the remarking much easier. I just go through and anybody who didn't get 6 right gets it right now. Okay, good. Well, that'll teach me to be more careful, won't it? Okay. Okay, I think people did much better on this question. I hope you did well on this question. So 2 premises have a dependent relation to a conclusion when neither premise is sufficient to demonstrate the conclusion. You can have independent premises that are nonetheless insufficient or not jointly sufficient. That there's a necessary connection between the premises and the conclusion. Not really, because you can have a necessary connection from independent premises, like if it is raining, then it is raining, is a necessary connection, but it's not a dependent relation. The relevance of each premise to the conclusion depends on the truth of the other. That's the one we were looking for, yeah? But not D, if the premises are true, then the conclusion is guaranteed. That's to mix up dependent premises with deductive arguments. Yeah? Yeah.
Yeah, just for B, we did say that it applies to this case, but it also applies to another case.
But
Distinction for what the incorrect answer, is that correct?
well, so I would say that it's not necessary. So there's a necessary connection between the premises and the conclusion. That's not generally true of dependent reasons. So you can have merely an inductive. You can have a dependent but inductive argument. So like if the barometer is dropping, then it's likely to rain. The barometer is dropping, therefore it's going to rain. I had to weaken the conclusion there. If I'd said it's likely to rain, then it would have been a deductive argument. But if you weaken the conclusion or strengthen the conclusion, say it will rain, then those are dependent reasons that are nonetheless have an inductive relationship with their conclusion. Yeah. Yeah.
What was the answer again?
The answer was C. The relevance of each premise to the conclusion depends on the truth of the other.
But these are also like neither premise sufficient to demonstrate the conclusion also. Right? Like, you need those two to depend on each other to justify the conclusion. It's not enough to justify it.
That fails to screen off independent. Like there's only one other, in this case, there's only one other option. It's either dependent or independent. And insufficiency applies really equally to both, right? So remember the example of the conclusion is I saw 5 ducks today. If you say I saw a duck in the morning and I saw a duck in the afternoon, neither one of those premises is sufficient to establish the conclusion, but they're nonetheless independent. So sufficiency and dependence really don't have much to do with each other, I would say. But you guys are making good, solid attempts at this anyway. Okay. So according to David Lewis, a conditional is true when A, if you imagine the premises are true, it becomes reasonable to believe the conclusion. That was Ramsey. The consequent follows necessarily from the antecedent. That's too strong. Conditional doesn't have to be a necessary relationship. It can be translated into categorical. David Lewis didn't say anything about that. It's D that we're looking for. The conclusion is true in the nearest possible world where the antecedent is true. Yeah? I really narrowed this down by saying specifically David Lewis's version of the conditional, because he had a very particular thing, and I only said a few things about what he thought. He's the possible worlds guy, yeah? Okay. Think about these some more, like feel free to think about these more and email me later. If you think of a brilliant argument for why I should accept another one, please do email me and I'll take it into consideration. Okay. Hume's law says you cannot get normative conclusions from descriptive premises. That's the version of Hume's law that I wanted you to take away. Ought implies can, that was Kant. No ethical theories can be justified. That's much stronger than what the version of Hume's law I taught you. Hume doesn't necessarily think that there's no sensible ethical talk. He just thinks that you can't get ethical conclusions without ethical premises. And causes cannot be observed, they can only be inferred, is another thing that Hume said, but it's not Hume's law. Yeah? Okay. And finally, a sound argument is a guarantee of the truth of its conclusion. If it's an actually sound argument, the truth is guaranteed. The truth of the conclusion is guaranteed. Whereas an argument which is completely valid, that's not enough to say that it's sound. One of the main things we've been trying to tease out for you here is the difference between valid arguments and sound arguments, and I've been trying to emphasize that just because it's valid doesn't mean it's sound, although if it's sound, then it is valid. Yeah? Okay. Similarly, an argument with oh, yeah. An argument with a true conclusion. Well,
They are properties, like those are requirements for sound argument, right? It has to be valid to be sound as well.
It has to have true premises.
Yes. Well, in case it's a valid one, they're
right.
completely valid arguments that aren't sound, right?
That's right. There are also arguments with true conclusions that aren't sound and arguments with true premises that aren't sound. So the question here is it fair to expect you to be answering, like giving me the best answer, or are these partial answers enough for a multiple choice question?
It depends if the question is asking for like,
A description or a definition?
or
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's right. I think that's right. Well, I'm going to be embarrassed if there's two questions that all have correct answers. Okay. Here's what I propose to do. For this question, I did not explicitly say, give me a definitional version of this. The is there is ambiguous between description and definition. So, embarrassingly, I'm going to accept all of the answers to this question as well, all based on your arguments. However, in future, I'm going to explicitly say that what we're looking for is definition. So if I give you an answer that's partly true but isn't sufficient, then that's not good enough. So in future, if I give you this exact question, the three answers that are only part answers are not good enough. Only the one that gives you the whole thing is good enough. Does that sound fair? Yeah.
Isn't A also one kind of like
A part, yeah.
not really a definition? Because
It's
a sound argument, like you have to have a guarantee of the truth of its conclusion for it to be.
But I would reply that there is no other type of argument that is a guarantee of the truth of its conclusion. So this is sufficient to do what we want definitions to do, which is to give you necessary and sufficient conditions. So if any argument is actually a guarantee of the truth of its conclusion, you can use that to decide that, yeah, that's a sound argument. You'd have to go through all the process of figuring out that it's sound, like determining the truth of the premises and whether it's valid or not. But yeah. Okay. Okay. So two of those questions are basically just null. I'll go back and adjust everybody's marks accordingly. Yeah. Well, that'll bring the average up a bit anyway. Yeah. Okay, so just very briefly, we'll go through the rest of these. So for these definitions, because this is an open-ended thing, I hope that the TAs accepted a variety of things is all right. For defining ethical theory, we were looking for something like an account of what values you should hold or something like that, or an account of what's good or bad, maybe a couple examples, that kind of thing. Taking these up, like there's too many of you and there's not enough time to take them up with you individually. If you want to email me to ask why exactly you got the mark you got, or come to office hours after class on Thursday, that would be ideal. Yeah? Okay, so ethical theory, I mean, any of the things that we said about ethical theories should have been good for that. Necessity, probably something about possible worlds or something like that, yeah? Is that all right? Explain the difference between a valid argument and a sound argument. Once again, if I let you leave this class without having you able to do this, I will have failed you deeply. So I hope that you all got this. If you didn't get this, it's a valid argument is one where if the premises are true, then the conclusion must also be true. And a sound argument is one where the premises are true and it's valid. Yeah? You should all get that. This is too central and too yeah. Anyway. Okay, so identify a missing premise in the following argument. Lead poisoning is a major health concern, so it should be high on our list of priorities. What are some things that you got for that? If you got full marks on that, what did you write down? Yeah. Major health concerns are a high priority, or maybe should be a high priority. Yep, that kind of thing. Anything that connected the first thing to the second thing, really. It didn't even have to be plausible or true, just like something that would make it make sense. I believe so. Did you? Okay. For the exact same thing. Okay. Then you definitely need to get in touch with me. So, okay. Similarly, there are no shadows, therefore the sun is not shining. You get yeah.
The sun must be shining for there to be shadows.
The sun must be shining for there to be shadows. That should be full marks. Did you get full marks for that? Okay. Yeah, we'll have to talk about those then. Okay. And here was the Denny's thing. I take it that it was a 3-part dependent relation leading to premise 4. We're going to Denny's, and then we're going to Denny's and premise 5. You need to dress properly leads to the conclusion. If you got something like relatively similar to that, you should get at least part marks. But again, I think this is it's too open-ended and too there's too many of you to go through this in any more detail, but yeah.
Would it be like good food and good atmosphere are dependent for the reason that we're going to Denny's? Because
so what would the structure there be? So with this breakdown.
okay, so for example, Denny's has good food in P1.
Yeah.
Denny's restaurant has good atmosphere in P2, right? Now these would definitely give us that we should only go to. It doesn't give us that we should go to restaurants. I mean, he says we only go to restaurants that have good food and nice atmosphere.
Yeah.
He says Denny's has both.
Yeah.
That is the reason they're going to Denny's.
Yeah.
How do you put that in an argument?
Like that. I mean, you can see, oh, sorry. Oh my God, I'm sorry. I've been going through slides this whole time and this screen has been off. I'm so sorry. Yeah, there you go. I'm sorry about that. That's what I thought. Yeah, they should have a dependent relationship. Yeah. If you have something that you think makes sense that isn't this, then you should get in touch with me either via email or during office hours on Thursday. Okay? Okay, thanks everyone.